Jay says, how can I work through feelings of envy that prevent me from being happy for others when they achieve life goals that you deeply wish? You're feeling like a bad person for desiring misfortune for others. Thank you for your effort and understanding to bring every time your dedication makes a meaningful difference. Oh, well, thank you, Jay. I'll tell you a story of desiring misfortune for others. Some of you may have heard this story. It is a true story. When I was in first grade, I think it was first grade, maybe it was second, but anyway, we had a tree in our backyard. It's a mulberry tree, which are invasive weedy trees, let's face it. You probably don't really want one because the birds love it, and then everything around you turns purple when they poop all over the place for about a month. You know what I'm talking about if you have a mulberry tree near. So they were delicious, though. I mean, it was always fun to go out in the yard and eat mulberries all the time. And one of them was great for climbing. There was just the way it leaned against the fence and everything. I could get up there, I could climb through. And it was not doing well, and my parents decided that they wanted to do some work in the yard and do some remodeling, so they took that tree out, and I was really disappointed because I liked to climb that tree. And so the guy that came to cut the tree down was kind of a free climber, one of those guys that would climb the tree with a little chainsaw, and he'd go up to as far as he can go, and he'd chop, and then it would fall down, and then he'd come down a few feet and he'd chop again and come down and just keep chopping and chopping and doing it that way. I'm mad that this guy is chopping down my climbing tree, and so I'm looking out the back window of our house, and I'm just intensely irritated, and I wish for him to fall out of the tree, and don't you know it, he falls out of the tree, and I'm like, yes, woohoo, my tree is saved. He just got right back up and went right back up the tree and continued cutting. So it was a short-lived misfortune. But Jay, now that I am nearly 50 years beyond that, how much guilt should I have, Jay, for the potential pain and suffering? What if that day he wasn't in much pain, but what if it slightly altered a disc in his back? And over the course of many years, that altered disc slightly shifted more, putting more and more pressure on his spinal cord, until one day he woke up in severe pain and went to the hospital, and they couldn't really figure out what was going on, so they did some tests and some x-rays, and they finally saw that this disc was slipped over, and now he was going to have a surgery. And he went into the surgery to have the surgery with one of the best surgeons in the country. But unfortunately, something went wrong during the surgery. There was a terrible mistake happened, and something got cut that shouldn't have gotten cut. And when he came out of surgery and woke up, he was paralyzed from the chest down and wasn't able to move. And because of that, his family didn't like him anymore because they didn't want to have to deal with somebody who was in a wheelchair, and they felt that that was just too much effort, and so they abandoned him. And then because he could no longer work, he was kicked out of his home, and now he lives on the streets and begs for money and secretly knows that I did that and is looking for me, and it is why I move every 3 months, because I don't want to be found by this person. Now, that may sound like a far-fetched story, or it may sound like OCD, right? Because OCD would go there and kind of take it to that level, and then, geez, had I just not wished for that person to fall out of the tree, oh my. Look at the lives I have ruined. His family, his children, himself, his grandchildren, all of these people. You know, he'd probably be in his, he was a young guy, he was probably in his late 70s by now. So, you know, and it's getting cold. Maybe he's still in the Chicago area where I grew up, and therefore maybe now he's out on the streets and he doesn't have a blanket. Maybe if I was a morally scrupulous person, I should go drive to Chicago and drive around all the neighborhoods and see if there are any people who are homeless who are in wheelchairs, and I should interview them to see if they've ever been tree cutter downers, and if they were, beg them for their forgiveness, pay for a hotel for them, or a long-term place to stay, because I am the one who ruined their life. Does that sound out of the ordinary, or does that sound like somewhere where OCD might actually go? I'll let all of you be the judge of that, right? Now, Jay, back to your question. I think that everybody at some point has probably had a thought about, well, I don't feel so bad for them. There's a Get to Know OCD podcast that I do coming out, and in it, I got bamboozled by Tia, and they turned the tables and they interviewed me. So you get to hear lots about me in one of these. And I talked about something like this that was more recent. I talked about how, and Beth, if you're here tonight, Beth, you will think I'm nuts when I say this, but I liked COVID. And the reason I liked COVID was because, my wife, as many of you know, was very ill, and we didn't go out and do much anymore. We kind of lived a very isolated life, and I felt a lot of FOMO. I felt like I was really missing out on everything. Everybody else was out doing things. They were going to new restaurants or new clubs or new bars or seeing movies and doing all sorts of things that we weren't doing anymore because of her mobility issues and her susceptibility on certain treatments to getting sick. And so when COVID came out, I thought to myself, oh, cool. Now everybody is living like me and us, and no one is getting to do anything anymore that is cool or fun, and I don't feel so bad anymore. So, Jay, how bad am I, and how bad am I of a person that I kind of enjoyed the fact that everybody was not going out and living life in such a way at the time. I don't feel that way now, right? But I was in a very different headspace back then. So, Jay, am I a terrible person for that? And do you want to take away your thank you for the effort and support and understanding that you gave me? Or could you excuse me for, at that point, being in the situation that I was in, being like, yeah, wow, I get it. That I can understand, right? So, everyone, let's allow some grace for our thoughts. Let's allow for the fact that all of us think things. We won't always like every single thing that pops into our head, and we don't have to, right? And here's the interesting thing. Thoughts that are really awesome are just as intrusive as thoughts that we hate, and yet we don't mind the ones that are awesome. We just don't like the ones that we hate, so we call them intrusive thoughts, but they're both equally intrusive. One we just happen to not care so much about. Keep that in mind.